Welcome to Kitchen Table Finance.
Dave, how goes it, my friend?
Goes great, Nick. How are you doing?
Wonderful. We got an exciting
Wonderful.
episode today. I'm going to just jump right in because we've got some good stuff to talk about and want to get right to
Yeah.
it. And that is how having a grandchild might change your retirement plans and some things you should think about. And I hear that you have firsthand experience in this, right?
I do. I'm learning on the fly here, which is great because, we've both coached clients through these kind of things in the past. And I've got a whole bunch of like rites of passages going
Oh,
on.
yeah.
I
Right?
didn't say that right, but you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting dynamic, and we see it with clients a lot, and you're experiencing a little bit, so I want to hear more about that. But it's just kind of this, like, you get to a point where, the kids are grown, they're off doing their own thing, and you're
hmm
just kind of focusing on yourself and your own little empty nester bubble. And then all of
Right.
a sudden the grandkid comes in and just pops the whole thing, and you got to kind of reorganize, right? Priorities shift a little bit.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So, my granddaughter Lily Ann was born early this spring. The main thing that we were going to talk about today was that I shifted from putting a little money in my son's Roth every year, matching grant that we did for him,
Oh, I
to
love that.
instead funding. Yeah, yeah. So instead, we're funding his daughter's 529 plan now.
All right. So,
Yeah.
how does he feel about this shift?
He was totally on board with it.
I
He thought
love
that
it.
was great. He was. Yep. Yep. I
So,
no pushback. I'm not sure his sister will have the same reaction, but
there you go. Can't you do both, Dad? So
right.
let's go back a little bit because I think that's
Yeah.
another interesting topic that we've never really discussed either. But how did you come upon this idea of like a matching contribution to a Roth when your kids were kind of in that between stage of graduating college, getting first time jobs? Like what motivated that?
Well, what motivated it started as like, what are we going to get this kid for his birthday,
Yeah.
right? Because
Right.
he doesn't really need anything, and he doesn't. Ben has very modest material needs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like we were trying to figure out like what would make sense. And I went to him and said, "Hey, for your birthday, I want to put money in your Roth IRA.
Yeah.
Um, we will do X if you will do Y."
Yeah.
And it's just kind of been a thing every year on both my kids' birthdays. We've moved a little money into their Roth. I mean, we're not trying to max it out. It'd be
Right.
lovely if we could, but
Sure.
nothing that was going to compromise our own goals for retirement. But also, what's the number one way to increase your return? It's to increase your time frame, right?
Yeah. For
and
sure.
and so by getting some money into their Roth IRAs when they were in their late teenage years,
Yeah.
what those should compound to over their working lives,
Oh yeah.
doesn't like the investment choices don't have to be stellar for that to work
Yeah.
well.
Right.
And and at the same time, it was teaching them the idea of
Oh yeah.
delayed gratification and, um, a little bit about the markets and, choosing mutual funds. Neither of them really have a lot of interest besides thanks,
Yeah.
but that's okay. At least
Right.
the bigger picture concepts of saving and making choices
Oh
and
yeah.
leaving it alone are all there.
Yeah. I think it's a huge like learning experience, and unfortunately, not all kids' parents are financial planners, so they don't always get that
Right.
that conversation at
Yeah.
16. But it's so what I love about it is they have some skin in the game, right? Like they need to be putting money in, and that's important. But also it gives them the ability to see like how important that is over time, and to
Right.
just teach them about like compound interest, all that stuff. When you show them those numbers, it's like a no-brainer, like, hey,
Yeah.
that's not that
Yeah.
much money for what like the future payoff is when I'm retired, right? And so it's
Yes.
this great ability to kind of use your money to help them out, but also to have so that they have some skin in the game, they understand it, and they hopefully make those good choices going forward. I love
Absolutely.
that. And we have talked to clients about doing things like that in the past as well. But I think it's a great, important step, and a funny little story. And this will be a good transition to the next part too. But my son's birthday comes up every year, and he's got 4 sets of grandparents. So he's getting presents from
Mhm.
everybody. Everybody wants to know what he gets or what he wants. He never has any idea until I
Yeah.
go to him and say,
Yeah.
listen, your choices are find something that you want, or I'll just put all this in your college fund for the future version of you. Inevitably, he
Yeah.
always finds something he
You
wants to
find
spend his
something
money
then.
on
Yeah.
other than the
Yeah.
college fund.
Yeah.
He's like, Dad, you put enough money in there already. I don't want more in there. So that's my transition to saving to 529 plan for your grandkids.
Right. So we opened a 529 plan for my granddaughter a couple weeks ago, and that's something we often tell grandparents as an option if they've got a little extra cash flow, and it's usually ranks up there as a goal for a lot of our clients. Not everybody, depending on situation. But
Sure.
for me, it was kind of interesting because I actually started my own kids' college funds back in 2001 when
Mm-hmm.
Abby was 5 and Ben was 2. And that was kind of a big deal for us at the time because we didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of extra cash flow. But I was a young financial planner and I was looking and seeing firsthand the difference between starting early and starting late and
Mm-hmm.
the discipline involved. It worked out really well. Our goal was to save up about 50% of what our kids needed inside college funds and then
Yeah.
have some flexible funds to augment that because of the way our cash flow and stuff worked, but it
Mm-hmm.
worked out well. Abby averaged about 6%
Mm-hmm.
over the 15 or so years that her funds were in there, and Ben averaged about 8%. And that was largely because he's younger, so he was more aggressive coming out of the funds are based on age,
Right.
and geared to become more conservative as you get close to college age. And so in the middle of the financial crisis, we were able to save more, which
Mm-hmm.
was kind of a key. And his was a little bit more aggressive than Abby's. And that played out well over the next, the rest of that decade up until he needed it. So we were overall very happy with the Michigan 529 plan
Yeah.
and how those worked because it worked well for our kids. For Lily, it took about 5 minutes to open an account. Basically, all I needed was my date of birth and social security number, her date of birth and social security number. I think I needed my wife's as well because I listed her as contingent owner.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so just by way of background, the way this works is one person is the owner, one adult is the
Mm-hmm.
owner. They name a contingent owner if something happens to them, and then the child is the beneficiary.
Yep.
And I needed my bank information because I
Yep.
set up an automatic monthly deposit.
Yeah, I've set those up before. Super easy, intuitive. You can, like you said, set your bank account up and do it automatic. And I think they'll let you do as little as like $25 a month.
Yes, I believe
So
so.
it's not like you were talking like huge dollar amounts here. And
Right.
one of the things that you have to kind of figure out, and I know you talk about this we wanted to talk about this too, but like that dynamic of how much do we put in and what does that
Hmm.
look like? And it's a little bit different for grandkids as a grandparent because there's usually multiple parties involved, right?
Right.
And so, like,
Right.
how do you figure out, how much you're doing versus what everybody else is doing? Because what you don't want is too much
To
money in a
overdo it.
529 plan, right?
Right. Right. Which isn't the end of the world. I wouldn't
There's
stress
worse
about that
problems
too
for
much.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is a concern. You don't want to definitely don't want to overdo it. So talking to my son, he knows that his father-in-law has something for
Yeah.
college for
Hmm.
Lily Ann. And so I asked him to talk with his father-in-law and kind of get a sense for what that might look like, just so we're not um, overdoing it.
Right.
I don't anticipate we are, but just so that we don't end up in a place down the road where, hey, one of us should have been, putting money in a Roth instead of in a
Right.
529 plan or, doing something different.
Yeah, and it is an interesting dynamic because there are some people, depending on what their goals are, but like
You're
our
frozen.
max funding 529 plans just for the purpose of, hey, we want this to be a legacy thing. We want it to be for our grandkids and our great grandkids and on down the line. So I think that's an important consideration to have those open lines of communication, because there is an issue with potentially putting too much in an account like that, especially if somebody else is max funding it. Some of the rules have changed a little bit with the Secure Act 2.0, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not going to completely, eliminate the fact that it has to be used for qualified higher education expenses. So just something to consider. And like I said, have those conversations with all the parties involved. And one of those interesting questions, which I'm kind of curious of how you came up with the direction that you went, Dave, is the option is you can open up an account yourself in your name with the child as a beneficiary. You can gift that money to your son. He can put it in there. So you could have one account. So I'm curious, like, why you decided to do it the way that you did. Although I'm kind of guessing I have an idea, but.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to get it done, and I wanted to fund it. I can see changing that arrangement down the road.
Right.
Gifting the money, let Ben handle it at that point. But for now, I think this makes the most sense. There are some concerns about how grandparents' 529 plans are handled for the FAFSA. I think that's changed though recently, and will probably change 3 more times before little Lily is anywhere close to college age. So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, well, there's, if you're making the contributions and the account is in your name, you have control, right? And for some people, it's important, right? Like you don't want if you give it to your kids and they put it in there, they can take it out for whatever they want to, theoretically. Not that, all of our kids are angels, so none of them would ever do that. But it's a concern for some people. And then there's also, for the state of Michigan, there's the Michigan tax credit. So if you're making those contributions, you're getting the tax credit because it's getting reported to your SOCH for your taxes. And the state of Michigan taxes are 4.25%, and you can write off $10,000 of contribution. So we're not talking about humongous dollar amounts, but any tax credit is a good one, right?
It definitely helps. At the end of the day, it was more about, hey, I just want to do this and be the one to get it going. It wasn't wasn't really worried about any malfeasance on the part of the parents or I'll definitely take the tax break, but that's not the be all and end all.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you can, change that relationship down the road. You can transfer ownership. There's different things that you can do with those accounts or the money going forward. So like you said, if you're in a hurry and want to get it started, it's a great way to do it. So another thing that I want to ask you is, obviously, or maybe not obviously to our listeners, but every state has a 529 plan. And so you selected the Michigan plan back in 2001 and went with it again now in 2025. So I want to walk us through that a little bit.
Well, so as Michigan residents, we do get the tax break for the Michigan plan. You can use any plan in the country, but if your state offers a tax break, that's usually going to be your best option. That said, different states offer their plans through different custodians. Some have more expensive funds, some have less expensive funds. Some are broker sold where there's commissions involved. You need to vet those. But the Michigan Educational Savings Plan, the MESP, Michigan's 529 plan, consistently ranks in the top, I want to say in the top 10% or so nationally.
Top 5 usually.
Yeah. I mean, it varies a little bit year to year based on, some different metrics, but it's consistently in the top handful of state plans. So if you are a Michigan resident, there's really no reason to look elsewhere. And I've got out-of-state clients that actually used the Michigan plan because we're familiar with it, and B, because it ranks right up there with.
Yeah. Well, another nice part about those plans, no matter what state you get your 529 in, is it doesn't matter where your grandchild lives or goes to school. They can use it for qualified higher education expenses at any, university that accepts federal student aid. Is kind of the that is expanding even more to now with the changes to the Secure Act and the latest tax bill where it's trade schools and things like that. So that in
Yes.
K through 12. So it is opening up more and more every year as to how you can use those funds and where you can use them at.
Yeah, that's been the evolution of these programs since they were started, is to continually broaden out the definition of qualified expenses and also to continue to make them more user friendly on the back end. Back to that
Yeah.
idea of what happens if we have too much money in a 529 plan. They've gotten more and more generous about how you can deal
Yeah.
with that, with the latest iteration being that excess funds to a certain extent can be rolled into a Roth for the beneficiary,
Right.
which is pretty slick.
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense. We have this student loan crisis out there. We've got all this
Right.
student loan debt, and there's several different potential solutions to that. But one of them going forward is if we get more people saving in these savings vehicles with tax incentives, maybe we have less student loan debt down the road, which I think
Right.
is a good thing, right?
Right. As a taxpayer, I would a lot rather see tax incentives to save intelligently than see tax dollars going to subsidize loans after the fact.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
without going down too deep a political rabbit hole. That's
Yeah.
good philosophy in general, I think.
So one other final kind of question I had for you, and we touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to go into investment options and kind of
Yeah.
what the thought process was there, especially being that you're in the industry and do this on a daily basis. So, do you need to be a CFP in order to set this account
You
up and
you
figure
do
out the
not need to
investments?
be a CFP. You do not need to really know anything other than that the funds are geared. The choices that I used are basically the target age funds,
Mm-hmm.
which it's no longer target date, or I'm sorry, it's no longer target age. It is now target date because the funds can be used for K through 12 private
Right.
schools now.
Right.
They changed this since my kids were in the plan. It was originally like when they turned 18, they became
Mm-hmm.
conservative, or that was the
Right.
trajectory. Now you pick a date when you are likely to use the funds.
Yep.
And for Lily, I chose right around her 18th birthday as being the year she would most likely use them. But you can say 12 if you think they're going to go to private middle schools and
So, yeah.
high schools. So you do not need to really overthink the investments at all. The state of Michigan uses TIA as their asset manager, and they do a pretty good job in this respect of managing those funds appropriately. So two things: you need to know the target year that you would want the funds to be planned on being spent, and you need to then trust the asset managers to do their job and leave it
Yeah.
alone. And I
Yeah.
do both.
Yeah.
We've been in this industry collectively like 40 years, I think, between the two of us.
Right.
Neither of
Yeah.
us are going to outthink the team of CFAs at most
Oh,
custodians that
yeah.
would be designing the asset allocations here. We
Yeah.
might get lucky, but that would
For
be all it
sure.
would be.
For sure. Yeah.
So
And like the statistical difference would be very minimal
very
for
minimal,
sure.
right?
So I want to go back to one other thing that you said way back in the beginning, and that was around the idea of, making sure, and you even said it was kind of, you were hard pressed back in 2001 to start these things, but just this
Mm-hmm.
idea between like, what are you saving for yourself? How do you make sure you're on
Yeah,
track before you start saving for college and things like that? Because there is some school of thought around this idea of put your own mask on before you help the person next to you, kind of
true, true.
analogy.
Um, So I got to really think back. At the time, both Amy and I were covered by 401k plans that had fairly generous matches. And I remember at the time having my 401k percentage right around the match amount,
Yeah.
which was higher than a lot of what you see today. I want to say it was 6 or 7%, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been a while. And so we felt like we were doing a good job in terms of our own retirement savings. We also kind of had a sense, I mean, a lot of it is a leap of faith, but how our career arc would look.
Yeah.
and there was no real rocket science to it. We basically just picked a number that we were comfortable putting into the 529 plans without having to go without groceries or putting diapers on credit cards,
Yeah.
and um, and went for it, and it worked out well.
Yeah.
I can't say there was a ton of spreadsheets involved at that point in our lives. It was more about,
Sure.
hey, can we put $100 into each of their plans every month?
Right.
Yep, and that's what we started with.
Yeah. You felt good. You're still making retirement contributions. You had a good solid savings percentage already, so it wasn't
Mhm.
like it was a hey, one or the other kind of decision.
Right,
But
right.
I guess what I would say to our listeners is those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to make sure that, if
Yeah.
you're getting ready to retire and you're not sure where you're at, you should probably figure that out first before we start putting, and I'm not talking about $25 because I think everybody for the most part
Well,
could part with $25. But if you're talking about bigger amounts and it's something that you're serious about, you should really make sure you're on track and how that might impact your financial plan before you start worrying about somebody else's.
right.
With that, Dave, I appreciate you sharing your
Yeah.
experience with us. I think that's super helpful and something that a lot of our clients, as they're nearing retirement, thinking about retirement, are faced with. And so I think that's a good lesson for everyone. And if our listeners have questions, feel free to shoot them over to us at info@srbadvisors.com. And if you need more insights or would like to talk to us, make sure you check out srbadvisors.com and click on the Get Started button. With that, Dave, thank you, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, Nick. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for another chat about your retirement and finances. Please hit that subscribe button. You can also contact us at srbadvisors.com or email us at info@srbadvisors.com. See you next time on Kitchen Table Finance.
This is a Zedia Media production.